Kai Hoffmann, CEO of Soar Financial Group, is back to give us an update on the sentiment of the gold market and important data that investors need to be paying attention to when it comes to deals, capital formation, and fundraising in the sector. Kai, welcome back. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, David. Thanks for having me back on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, let's recap your day today. You had a busy day with the Soar Financial Group's conference here. You spoke with a lot of junior miners today, starting from early in the morning until, late afternoon. Give us an update on the sentiment, what they're discussing now.
Yeah, it's been a long day. I've been up since 4 a.m. and we've hosted SF Online Session 5, and we hosted 10 companies from junior exploration company, grassroots, just doing their first drill campaigns, to a mid-tier producer, the Equinox Gold. And it was interesting to see the feedback also, and lots of companies are still waiting for assay results. So that's sort of the sentiment. People are waiting, patiently waiting as well, as we haven't seen stocks drop off or anything, and they're waiting for results for catalysts in those companies.
Speaking to a junior miner recently who told me that they're ramping up exploration in 2021. Is that something that's consistent across the sector, or is it company specific?
Both. And fortunately, we've seen a lot of influx or inflows in capital the last 12 months, right? So we've raised as much money, or we raised $5.5 billion in the companies we're tracking. That's companies with a market cap below $1.5 billion. That's a huge amount. That's the highest amount since 2011. And of course, that money wants to get spent. So they're revamping or ramping up drill programs. They're really expanding, adding new assets to it. So there's going to be a lot of demand for drills. And we hear in certain areas, drills are just booked out. Labs are overflowing with assays, and of course, lots of activity. And as an investor, that's exactly what we want to see, because we want to see if those projects actually have some merit, if some proper shareholder value can be created, not just being diluted there.
Yeah, I'd like to get your get a sense of where capital raising is at today. Like last year, you said, fantastic year for miners in terms of raising capital. No issues there. What about this year? The gold price has not done very well in the last month or so, or 3 weeks. I don't know what's sentiment like now.
It's a slow start to the year. A lot of uncertainty around the gold price. First we ticked up, then we ticked down. We lost quite heavily. So the bankers are not really there yet. And we're waiting to see what's happening in the US. I think that plays into it. Like the US, the presidential election, or the change in the White House is happening next week, actually exactly a week from now. There's just too much uncertainty. That's why the markets have been slower. And our Ornic index is slower as well, or lower as well. We're only at 54 points, only because we've seen one bigger brokered financing this week. Other than that, it's been fairly mute. We've seen an influx of capital the last few weeks of 2020. A lot of smaller financings, though, flow through capital being raised. And so far, it hasn't really carried over into 2021. Also, we hear that the TSX has problems going through listing applications and RTO and QT applications. So that's holding back the market maybe a bit as well.
So what would happen if fundraising this year doesn't go as smoothly as last year? What would happen to developments, exploration projects, drilling, stock prices of some of these miners? What would you expect?
That's a good question. And I think it depends, again, from company to company, right? So the ones that are active, they're actually able to prove something up within the next 3 to 6 months with their drill campaigns. We'll see what the assays bring. They'll be able to raise more money. The ones that didn't hit anything, that just spent the shareholders' money without proving anything up, they'll have a hard time again. They'll be struggling. So if the sentiment doesn't improve as of right now, of course, those smaller companies will be hurting, and which is fine with me, because they didn't prove anything. They didn't create any shareholder value. And unfortunately, we didn't get rid of enough companies in the last down cycle. They're all coming back, and you see a lot of companies coming back to market, even just raising $500,000 to $1 million, which I'm not too excited about.
Yeah, you're not too excited about it. I think sentiment has taken a turn. This is. I spoke last year with you in the summer. Well, we spoke a couple of times. I remember in the summertime, you had a much more positive, optimistic outlook, and now it doesn't sound that way anymore. It sounds like you're a bit more neutral. Is that mainly due to the price of gold, or is there something else?
Personally, I'm quite optimistic. I'm happy with the price of gold where we are right now. 1850 is tremendous. I think it was BMO who put a study together of the gold producers and the cash flow of the next 4 years until the end of 2024. And at 1850 gold, they'll be producing over 90 billion US in free cash flow. And that's just the top 10 gold producers, right? So I'm extremely happy with the current gold price. The problem is we're waiting for assays. We're waiting for results from those, from the juniors. So there's a bit of a lag and a delay in sort of, let's call it excitement, right? Because you can only see what's in the rocks once you have the results in hand. Of course, you can take a look at it, the core, but you don't know really what's in it. So we're waiting for that. So that's why sentiment has slowed down a bit. And because we raised so much money in 2020, there's of course not enough money to go around right now to be invested into some of the companies. And we're just waiting for some more catalysts in the market in general.
Okay, so we're just waiting on the juniors to deliver some results before we make a decision. What about the seniors right now, Kai? They're sitting on a lot of cash built up from last year. What are they doing with all this cash?
Oh, I wish I knew. I have a couple ideas, but I'm hoping they're my personal preference is of course mergers and acquisitions, right? I'm not a big shareholder in those big companies. Like I'd rather play the junior game. So if share buybacks or so doesn't do it for me, but I'm assuming like we will be seeing increase in dividends as well. So giving back some of the capital to shareholders, hopefully attracting some of the generalist investors back to the space. I got to bring it up, but Warren Buffett made some news or waves last year when he entered Barrick. We're still scratching our heads why he did that, maybe as a hedge to the overall market, but he's not chasing the dividends in this sector, and the free cash flow yields in our space are just insane right now at this level. So I'm really curious to see the production and financial numbers coming out of the majors in the next few weeks, and we'll see where that takes us.
I'm curious as to why you've decided in your career right now to be more heavily invested in the juniors and the seniors. Where does that preference come from?
It's very simple. I used to work at Deutsche Telekom as an intern when I was, I don't know, how old was I? 21, 22. And to talking to the CEO, it seemed like you were talking to the Pope, right? Or Angela Merkel. It has the same level, right? And I was missing, maybe I'm a bit of a control freak, but I like having the close relationships to the junior miners. They're accessible. Some of them I have on WhatsApp, on or speed dial, as you would call it back in the day, right? And I can get my questions answered. So I'm just playing my advantage, like my home field advantage here.
So you feel like you have more access to information because you're closer with the management team.
Exactly. It's like, and I could just have my questions answered within a quick period of time. That's what the junior mining space is known for if they do their job properly.
I hear that from investors all the time, that management is probably the most critical component, well, one of the most critical components of an investment when you're looking at the junior, or even the senior mining sector. So when you're going out to evaluate a stock, a potential gold stock, how important is management for you?
Oh, it's still number one, right? So when I do my due diligence or I look at a company I haven't heard of before, first page I go on the website is management and directors. I want to know who's involved, like who's linked to who. And I've been in the industry for 10 years now. So you do have a bit of a network, or you can see the links popping up in your head when you look at the names. And that's extremely important, right? And unfortunately, we can't meet people in person right now. That is completely missing. And I'm hoping AM EBC Roundup is next week. So I'm curious to see how they're bridging that networking gap. But talking to the management, it's extremely important. How approachable are they? And in junior mining, like people often get that wrong. And in Germany as well, like when I say I talk to the CEOs, they think I'm talking to the head of Deutsche Telekom, but oftentimes there's 3 people in a company. So if they're not approachable, they're doing something wrong anyway.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the broad markets and your outlook on the economy now, because I've noticed that over the last year, in general, there's a significant correlation between the mining stocks and the broad equities indices, right? So on the one hand, for me, it's interesting to analyze this market. On the one hand, if you're positive on gold and bearish on stock, let's say you have that position, where would miners fall in your analysis? Would it go up with gold, or would it go down with stocks?
Oh, that's a very good question. And macro is not really my theme, but like in that space, you got to look at the dividend yields. And as a generalist investor,
sure,
like it doesn't really matter where that dividend is coming from. Right? Like Barrick is not a Johnson & Johnson that's been paying dividends for 120 years, but it is a safe hedge against everything else. Although when we do see a crash, and everybody's been predicting it, the Great Reset is the big theme on Twitter right now, and in a couple of your interviews as well. But just like if that really happens, gold stocks will crash as well, at least initially. We've seen that in March, so we can't escape. It's going to be a run for liquidity, although I'm not sure cash is the right liquidity or the right currency or right asset to hold at that time. So maybe that'll shift somewhere else, but investors wouldn't know where to put their money. So we will be hurting. Maybe it's not as bad when gold will stay flat, but the main markets crash, right?
And how would you personally be investing right now? Would you be more heavily invested in the junior mining space, or would you be sitting on more cash right now into gold, bullion? What are you doing?
Good point. A good question. Is like my personal portfolio, because I'm still younger, right? I'm only 36 years old. So it's like I'm full on risk. Like I'm almost 100% invested in junior space right now because I do expect a bump up later in this year. So I'm quite excited about what is going on. So I've done a lot of private placements personally. I don't hold too much bullion, unfortunately. I haven't had that opportunity just yet. And I don't own any blue chip stocks. Like I shouldn't be saying that. I'm not too diversified because I'm thinking I'm too young. So if I do tank tomorrow, if I go back broke, I do have a chance to rebuild, right? And set that portfolio up again.
I understand. Okay. Well, let's talk about your next the Soar Financial conferences. They're happening on a regular basis, right? What are you planning for the next time? When's it going to be? What are some of the themes we'll be discussing? Give us a little sneak preview.
Yeah, appreciate you asking. So SF Online Session 6 is happening February 10th. We got quite a few producers signed up. Victoria Gold, Step Gold, and others will be joining us. David Erfley will be presenting. He's a regular guest on Kitco as well, and a commentator on Kitco. So we're really excited to do that. Our format, as I said before, is 10 companies, 2 keynote speakers to make it a compact, very informative session. And it's free to register, obviously. soarfinancial.com/events. So use that.
Well, when you organize these conferences? Well, first of all, what was the inspiration behind organizing these Soar Financial sessions, and what do you hope for investors to get out of these conferences?
Good question. And like we have a bit of a different approach because we didn't want to compete with any of the existing conferences. There are some great conferences out there that target institutional or accredited investors, like a 121, a precious metal. They're doing a fantastic job, and the one-on-one meetings work really well. We're approaching retail, and mostly European. I'm German. Like our audience, half of it is European retail, which is really important. It's a nice mix and something very niche that not everybody can offer, and that's our target. And also, I'd like to say, like all the companies we are presenting, we know personally. I've either had a beer with them, I had a coffee with them, or we went through the presentation before we allowed them to present.
Have you had a chance to chat with some of the attendees of the conference? What are they feeling right now in terms of the gold price? Are they feeling optimistic? Are they bearish? How are people feeling?
Similar to me right now. They're quite happy where we're at. A lot of course, if you talk to the gold price speculators, they all want to go higher gold price because the fundamentals are there, right? And they can always name 10 reasons why gold should be higher. But what I've noticed today, actually, this morning, they asked about other commodities as well, right? So with Biden moving into the White House, the green initiative has been taking a lot of the news. So nickel, cobalt, but also uranium to a degree came to mention in the chat, and that was quite interesting.
Was fiscal stimulus on the agenda?
Not really. So, because Biden speaks tomorrow, so we're really curious to see what he's about to propose. Like besides the $2,000 stimulus check, he hasn't really committed hard to a number in terms of infrastructure spending. So I'm quite curious how that is going to, or how he's going to address that tomorrow.
How would that impact the gold market? Would it have any impact?
It's more on the commodity base metals. I'd assume so, right? And just copper, zinc. You'll need all of that infrastructure spending. If you've been to U.S. airports, for example, they definitely need an upgrade, and they all need new wiring. And gold might be left behind just a little bit in terms of the other, like attractiveness of the other commodities. But it's a great store of value because we're printing money, like we're inflating ourselves. At one point, that's going to bite us.
Well, that's an excellent point that you brought up. Do you expect the base metals to outperform gold this year? Is that a possibility?
Based on what I just said, yes. That's the fundamental reason for it, right? And that's what the market seems to be playing. If you look at the lithium companies, they're running right now. Lithium price is up again. Nickel is up. Copper's at $3.63 or something a pound this morning. So there's a lot of interest in this space. Well,
based on that, what do you see silver? Is that an industrial metal now, or is it more monetary metal? Still.
Flip a coin, David. Flip a coin and have that conversation. Like you have arguments for both sides, right? And it is being used in the industry. I think in Germany, I saw at one point there was a deodorant or so that you could use because it has a disinfectant and like a sweat. What's it called? Transparent. It stops transpiration, right? So there's that. There are arguments for both sides of the coin. I see it more as a precious metal, but then you use it in the industry, so where it gets destroyed more or less, right?
All right, perfect. All right, Kai, thank you so much for your updates. Good luck with the
appreciate it.
Next conference, and we'll speak again at the next conference.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, David.
All right, cheers. Thank you very much, Kai. Thank you for watching Kitco News. I'm David Lin. Stay tuned.